The Goon Piece is real, or is it? Or is it? Is it really Goon Piece, or are we misinterpreting what it really means? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, in this chapter, we may have gotten the reveal for what actually catalyzed God Valley, meaning why did Rox pull up? Why did Roger follow Rox? And then why did Garp follow Roger? All questions seem to orbit around one character, and that one character being Shocky. When she was first revealed to be a pirate in chapter 498, did anyone ever anticipate that she would be a pirate of such high standing in the last chapter, but to the point where she would be the origin, or she would be the catalyst for the actions of Rox and Roger to go to God Valley? Shocky? Shocky? Wait a minute, are we sure? Let's dive into this step by step and piece by piece for this week's chapter of One Piece. First of all, the chapter structure and pace. Number one. Number two is going to be the character components of the chapter. And number three is going to be the story progression components for this chapter of One Piece. And the first thing we'll be getting to, obviously, is none of that, because I have to give a brief word for today's sponsor, ladies and gentlemen. This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. Phishing attempts, cyber attacks, all the nasty hoo-ha malware and viruses that are out there in the World Wide Web. You need protection in your day-to-day life. Make sure that when you venture to these insane spots on the web, you are secure. And I know, my anime manga faithful, we go to some crazy, gnarly spots on the web. To each their own, but you do need a shield when you venture off into these dangerous parts of the woods. And let Surfshark VPN be that shield. Not only does it have anti-malware, antivirus features, but also it does have IP changing functionalities wherein which wherever you are, no one will know who you are. So Surfshark VPN can clean all that nasty stuff that is going to try and harm your device, and it doesn't matter which device it is. Whether it's Windows, whether it's Macintosh or Linux, whether it's on your desktop, laptop, phone, iPad, you name it, Surfshark VPN has you covered on all your devices, and it's available in so many different countries across the entire world. And one of the things I do absolutely hate is region gating. And I love how Surfshark VPN can circumnavigate region gating with the region change feature. So there are certain shows, animes, movies that I want to check out that, let's say, normally I can't on Netflix, on Hulu, you name it. Well, I can easily change my region, and then voila, I can gain access to that material, to those shows that normally I couldn't gain access to. So if you like what you hear, and you absolutely should, scan this QR code right here, don't be shy, or you can go in the box below to the website surfshark.com/KOL and get 4 extra months off of your purchase of Surfshark VPN. So, lads and ladies, on that note, let us get back to the video content at hand. Now we can dive properly into this chapter review of One Piece. And the first thing, of course, obviously is going to be the pace and the chapter structure. And for this chapter, we have a total of around 5 parts. Number 1 is going to be an island location that's apparently a charity sanctuary where the Rox Pirate crew invaded this area. And then we get to see more of the Rox Pirate crew dynamic, or lack thereof, because their dynamic is absolute dog water. That's the first thing. Number 2 is that we skip over to Harald, where Harald's in the New World in a non-government associated nation called Enshi, and then we see what plays out there with Harald. After that, we then cut back to Elbath, and then we have Harald meet up with Rox as part number 3. Number 4 is that we get some dialogue with the Marines. We get dialogue with a younger Garp, a younger Sengoku, a younger Otsuru, and a younger Kong. And then number 5 is 42 years ago on Fullet Island, we cut over to a situation involving the former captain at this point in time of the Kuja Pirates, Shakuyaku, where Shakuyaku not only is it revealed that she did lead the pirate crew, but also she arrives at Fullet Island and she opens a bar, Shaki's Ripoff Bar. And with the narration, that part cosigns with the elders and their plot to kill Rox D. Sebek. So that is it when it comes to the pace and chapter structure. Overall, the pace and structure is pretty simple, pretty cut and dry. Nothing too complex there or too hard to understand, honest to God. And even though, let's say some folks argue that Marine section is only 1 page, so why is it, let's say, it's its own separate thing, it's because we're cutting away to a whole new faction and a whole new focus. That has no connection with the previous section or no narration connectivity. That's why it'd be like its own section. Like, for example, we see it for time and time again, Wano Country, where Wano Country, there were so many points where all will have 1 page be a complete cut to a whole different thing and all different character do X, Y, Z and whatnot. and he would do that quite a bit in Wild Country. So one page can be its own section. In other stories, you don't necessarily get that, but One Piece, because there's so many different players are involved, you do get that quite a bit, and this chapter is an example of that, obviously. Now, I would say overall, pace, chapter structure, it is good. I would say for One Piece, under a 4 is great. That's fantastic pace for One Piece. Over a 4, good, and over an 8, I think it's a bit too many sections for a One Piece chapter, because now we're getting to the point where either every other page is its own section, which is a lot of individual parts for a chapter. So because this one has nice chunks of sections, easy to follow step by step, I would say overall it is good for the 5 sections of this chapter. That is pace and chapter structure. Now for the character components for this chapter. Number 1 for character is Whitebeard. At this point in time in the story, he did attain the Quake fruit. We do see him do the sort of oceanic tilt around the entire charity sanctuary. That's the same thing we see him do time and time again in the story. We see him do it in Marineford during the Oden flashback. He's done that quite a few times. So a normal Quake punch, let's say, get out of the situation where he was in with Kaido and company, no. Instead, I'm gonna literally tilt the entire area, the entire oceans around this island and then some, because I can just flex like that. That does make Kaido kind of jelly, because like, hold on, whoa, that's pretty cool. Well, yeah, but be careful though, okay? Because obviously this power, if you have this power, it sticks with you for life. And it is kind of crazy seeing Whitebeard talk to Kaido, because Kaido is the guy that does kill Oden, who Whitebeard would view as a brother, essentially. So that's the first thing for Whitebeard's character, where he does have this power at this point in time. So going into God Valley, Whitebeard does have the Quake fruit. He does. Which makes it all the more interesting, because if it is the case that Garling did give Whitebeard several scars during God Valley, it only makes Figureland Garling look better, because at that point in time, Whitebeard did have the powers of the Quake fruit. And then also very quickly too, Whitebeard, he is not really attracted to misbucking. We kind of got those vibes in the Kuma flashback, chapter 1096, but either way, he's not into her that much, which does pretty much mean that Weevil is not their kid. However, at the very end, where even though he doesn't have eyes for Miss Bucking, he does have eyes for Shocky, like many men. Many men love Shocky. So if you're wondering, well, hold on, the guy's not into Miss Bucking, Stussy at the time. He has a crew full of dudes. How does he swing? Apparently he swings. You see the heart eyes, he was locked in. So that is Whitebeard. And honestly, I'd say for most of the characters, for let's say characterization, all the dudes, they get the whole, they do dig Shocky. The vast majority of them that are, let's say, in that shot, carte blanche for all the characters that are in that shot. So far, no strong jaw mewing Rayleighs in sight. All these guys are folding. After this though, for character, we have real quick the Golden Lion Shiki. Getting to see the crew dynamic where he was willing to kill Whitebeard and Kaido and so on in that hole, and the same thing goes for Wang Zi. That's one thing. But the key thing here, I think, for Shiki is the fact that he has his power at this point in time. We do see after the whole crazy oceanic tilt stuff, Shiki doesn't care, because he's literally just walking on the sky. He's just chilling, having a good day. Now, next character is going to be Harald. Harald was willing to risk all of the good work that he had built up with the world government and the Navy, trying to make his home country into a world government certified nation. He was willing to risk it all at the sake of helping his allies in the Inishi country. Inishi country is not a nation that is world government certified in the New World. And remember, at this point in time, this sort of Yonko system is not really like established, as far as you know, in the New World. That happens later on, where let's say after Rocks, we find out, let's say for example, you have great pirates like Whitebeard and Roger and Shiki and a younger Big Mom at the point in time, or at least from this flashback, an older Big Mom, where they would rule parts of the New World, because they'd have like a whole section of islands to themselves. But we don't have that yet. Well, Roger, I guess, actually didn't really rule any islands, as far as you know. But that being said, the idea is simple. Because it's not really established, kind of like free reign, and then you'd have nations that let's say be bullied by world government forces, where in the modern day, hard pressed because you have to do a Yonko, that kind of stuff. Harald though is able to risk that goodwill that he built with the world government and actually take down a world government ship. He does even shave his head though, as a sign of like repentment to the world government. He didn't want to do it, but he kind of had to do it because he's allies with the Inishi country. So that is overall more stuff for Harald for his character. Now after Harald, we have, I would say, Garp. You could argue that Kong, for his character parts in this chapter to get something. Oh, well, I know the problem is that historically speaking, they're vicious people, the Elbathians and the Giants and so on. So you get to see like his hesitation, his timidness. If he has an admiral like way of justice, like you have the absolute justice of Akainu, you have the lazy justice of Kuzan. I would say for him, it's like the bitch made justice, because but Garp is built different. Okay, Garp flat out says that he wants the Giants on their side. All right, just bring Elbaf to the world government. He wants Elbaf to join the world government ASAP. It's explained in the Big Mom flashback. John Giant and other giants were joining the Marines. They all found it to be a very, very good thing. We see Marine Ford that every giant that's there is a vice admiral, and we even know that Saul himself is also a vice admiral. The strength of the Giants is constantly prized. It's constantly lauded to a very high state, and I know a lot of folks continue to rag on that, but they've already proven themselves in combat in real time on Egghead Island. But Garp himself even saying that he wants the Giants on their side. The Giants on their side would be a massive, massive boon. And it's in the same vein as Big Mom, where Big Mom admitted wholesale that if she had the Giants on her crew, she would be what? King of the Pirates. If Lola had committed to that marriage with Low-Key, Big Mom and an Elbathian alliance would have been on top of the world. But because Lola decided to dip, that's why she is so frustrated with Chiffon, who looks like Lola, and Lola herself, because she lost effectively the biggest opportunity of her lifetime. Garb kind of shows you that he's willing to try and amass military power for the Marines at this point in time, because he understands the value that the Giants bring to the table. Even though Harald did take down one of their ships because they were attacking a non-government nation, we should give them the free pass, because the benefits of the Giants to the world government, like having an armada of Giants, is far more valuable than losing one Marine ship and losing the funds from one non-certified world government nation. After that, for character, we have ourselves Big Mom. Big Mom, at this point in time, we do see the kids of Daifuku. We get to see Oven and a studly Katakuri arm sword is standing up on Big Mom's arm. And at this point in time, Daifuku, Oven, and Katakuri, all being triplets, should be 6 years old, because in real time they are 48 years old. And then low-key, something I want to point out, because it's my boy Katakuri. All right, listen, hello. Hello. Like, you know what? Let me. Just so you guys understand. Yeah. It's my boy Katakuri. That's right. And so because it's Katakuri, I'm about to milk this real quick. Some vitamin D. Now, it is stated, according to Brule, in chapter 882, legend says that he stood on his own 2 feet the moment he was born, and he fell asleep sitting upright in his chair. And look at Katakuri's stance when we see him in this chapter. Katakuri, arms folded, standing up on his mama's arm. Obviously not a newborn, he's 6 years old at this point in time. But when I see Katakuri's aura here, I'm willing to bet, you know what? Maybe he did in earnest sit up. He actually got up when he was born and sat and fell asleep on the chair. I am willing to buy that, absolutely. I think the legends could be true. Now, enough Katakuri glaze, let's focus on some Shaki glaze, or more so, Rox D. Sebek and company glazing her. We don't know the reason why she came onto Pirate Island to set up a bar, and why she left the entire pirate crew in the first place. The Kuja Pirates, you have no idea. So I can't necessarily gauge her character, but I can look at Rox's reaction to Shakuyaku. And when Rox sees her, he folds quickly, only solidifying her beauty established in the last chapter, where even someone like Gloriosa, who herself is very, very extremely attractive by all respects, Gold D. Roger moved her out of the way so he could get a better look at Shaki. So what Rox and the Goon Troop solidify, which was established in the previous chapter, is that within the story of One Piece, on paper, Shaki may be the most beautiful woman in her prime of all time among all women that exist in the series of One Piece. The Michael Jordan of attractiveness in the series. They valued her as a treasure. And now we segue over to the story progression components. But I'll say character-wise, overall, that was pretty okay. That was pretty good. Now, when it comes to the story progression components of this chapter. For the cover story, there's a grave for someone that fought against Kaido. Ushimaru did fight against Kaido when Yamato was a little girl, died off screen. So it could be Ushimaru's grave. It is what is there. The main thing for the first section of this chapter, I would just say it kind of summarizes the crew dynamic of the Rocks Pirate crew, where the Rocks Pirate crew are a savage crew. Not only are they a savage crew when it comes to whoever they're facing off against, but to each other. And obviously it was something that was said, let's say, in the ultimate chapter, and we see it time and time again. We saw a glimpse of that, let's say, in chapter 1096. But essentially speaking, the Rocks Pirate crew, they do not like each other. It was already stated before by the Gold Line Shiki in this arc, where if Rocks died, we wouldn't give a damn. We know that Rocks and his crew through dayback fights, and they're all essentially out for themselves. It is first come, first serve. We don't give a damn about each other. But I think for story progression, what's the most valuable thing here to understand, I think, is not them seeing the treasure, but it's Rocks' reaction to all the Marines that were surrounding him. And you can see how, like, the Marines that are surrounding him in the situation, it's more than a buster call. And what is Rocks' reaction? Sink them all and take their loot. And then we get here is effectively a sort of Whitebeard death stat sheet or a Kaido achievement sheet when he was first introduced after he fell to 10k. All these crazy stats about the accolades of the individual, the crew. And I quote, within 2 years of their founding, the Rocks Pirates were responsible for 16 recorded raids, 76 sunken ships, 14 ports buried to the ground, 5 towns leveled, 1 kingdom brought to ruin, which I think does harken back to the words about Goldie Roger, where Goldie Roger, he destroyed an entire nation because of someone making fun of his friend or someone hurting his friend. And then you have right here 3 special violations of Article 18 of the world law and 25 crimes that were completely covered up. 3 special violations of Article 18 of world law. What is that? Probably gonna be a very important law that's gonna be written in the future. And I thought maybe, for example, it actually involved the Celestial Dragons, because there is a number that's close to 18 that's very important to them. That's number 16. So what that is, I'm very curious to find out on. What's I think even more interesting is seeing also Rocks' perspective on how to deal with situations. When you go back to Whitebeard in the Odin flashback in chapter 965, when these Marines pull up on them, Odin wants to fight the Marines. But then Whitebeard says their entire organization, if we fight more of them, will just keep coming. So he decides to hightail out of there instead of actually fighting the Marines. But Rock says, no, fight the Marines and take all their stuff. And then you saw the same thing, let's say Goldie Roger in the last chapter, where Goldie Roger, the Marines are coming, he wants to just run away because it was a hassle to deal with them. But then he found that it was actually Garp. Okay, find a story. But with Rocks, even though they're random Marines, he's like, yeah, no, fight them and steal all their treasure. So the perspective of Rocks, which is Whitebeard, I think, is very interesting here, how these two kind of view situations. And then you could argue, let's say, it's in a similar vein to the ambitions of both men, where one man wanted a family, where the other man wanted world conquest and domination. Now, the next part here for story is, of course, the Herald section, where Herald does take on a Wargaming ship because they're attacking the country that he is allied with. And afterwards, we're going to see some talk between Rocks and Herald, where Rocks thinks that Garp should actually be a pirate because Garp hates the top brass of the world government. Herald explains how, okay, well, their entire organization, so not all of the people that are part of this group are going to be bad or rotten like the top brass. And it kind of reminds me of Sword, where members of Sword, I think, are the kind of folks that Herald's talking about. It kind of, I think, alluding to the idea that in the future, you're going to see Sword be probably the faces of the Marines after it's all said and done. But then you also have the idea that you have, again, the Giants are joining the Marines, start with, let's say, John Giant, and he actually wants to send, or he hopes to send more Giants over that are very powerful, so let's say they can do some good in the world and really help the image of the Giants improve across the entire globe under that Marine banner. And of course, Rocks hates that idea because he's like, yo, like, screw all that. Because again, his intent is to what? To take them all down, the established order of the world right now. You get to see some good dialogue here, I think, between Rocks and Herald, kind of showcasing that, yeah, they are really friends. Maybe not like close friends, but they are pretty good friends nonetheless, despite all things that happen. And then we get the whole Navy spiel here about how, like, essentially Giants are dangerous, where if one just rolls over in their sleep, they can, let's say, kill someone. And then Kong believes that coexistence is impossible. But again, we get that pushback from Sudu, from Sengoku, and from Garp. And Sudu's words about how, hey, if Herald joins the Rocks pirate crew, then there's a good chance that we, the Marines, can't stop them. Like, we might not be able to stop them. This is music to my ears, okay? Sinner's music. It's beautiful. The Giants are that much of a imposing force where they could literally change the entire tide of how the standing of the world works. They are the strongest military on the planet. The Giants of Elbaf. Emu right now has to make a move to try and subdue the Giants through all this trickery, through all this tomfoolery, the kids being hostages, X, Y, Z, and the other. And obviously I agree with Garb way more than I do Kong. Kong, again, bitch made justice. Facts, without a damn doubt, facts. But what's also facts is the undeniable beauty of Shakuyaku. Shakuyaku pulls up to Follett Island after leave the Kuja Pirates, and she makes a bar, the first Shaki's ripoff bar. And what they say in the narration is, in time, she would become an irreplaceable treasure to the pirates who made this island their home. And what is treasure if not for something that can be stolen? And then you see the last part, where in the last part of the chapter, you have the Holy Land, Mary Joe's Pub, the 5 elders. Give Harald this ultimatum then. If you warriors of Elbaf meet the final requirement, you will be allowed to join the government, kill rocks. There's a few things that are going on here that I think are very important. Number one is that, yes, it looks like it's very, very likely that the God Valley incident happened because the treasure of God Valley, which was probably Shaki, was captured by potentially the Giants of Elbaf or ops of the world government somehow, some way. And then she was captured, given to the Marines, kept somewhere near God Valley. Boom. Rox pulls up to save Shaki. And based on the previous chapter, we know how Roger feels about Shaki, and he pulled up too. And then we know how Garp feels about Roger, and then Garp pulled up too. It all kind of fits into place very neatly. Though I would argue it is a bit weird, I think, for one of the most pivotal moments in the history of the entire story of One Piece to revolve around Shaki. Shakuyaku. I think that kind of does throw me off, honest to God. But it's not uncommon where, let's say, in history or in certain fables and stories, you do have wars being fought over princesses and queens, and Shaki, I guess, would be the equivalent of that for the pirates on Pirate Island and for the Roger pirates. For pirates, and honestly for many men in large, they would make moves and they would move mountains for Shaki. The goon piece is real. Same thing with Hello Troy. Shaki is Hella, or Helen. What's interesting though is when you go back to the Kuma flashback on God Valley, and then you have the Rocks pirates pull up, you do have dialogue that kind of tells you what their intents are. And then you have statements, let's say, from people like Big Mom, where Big Mom says, they'll be mine. Shiki says, I assume it's finders keepers. Captain John saying, Fwehehe, that treasure is mine. When you say finders keepers, do you mean Shaki? Or the treasure is mine, you mean Shaki? Or Big Mom saying, they'll be mine, Shaki? The dialogue is a bit strange there, where based on what we read in this chapter, everyone seems to be aiming for the treasure, but is it the same treasure? We know that in God Valley, all the items that were there, all the treasures that were there were leaked. And maybe Shaki was not, let's say, one of those boxes, but let's say on the island somewhere. But also, every person has their own different intent on what they want on the island, potentially. Where we know, let's say Big Mom probably wanted the 2 fruits. She wanted the Paw Paw fruit and the Azure Dragon fruit. Let's say she wanted something else. Captain John wants something else. So each person has their own intent for getting something, but of course, for Rox, the main moving thing was Shaki. But again, if Shaki was on God Valley, maybe it was something else that moved them, and it was not Shaki. And this whole narration note could actually be a sleight of hand on Oda's part, where he's kind of teasing that God Valley could have been about Shaki, but in reality, it's not about Shaki at all. Because we know that Shaki winds up doing what? Shaki winds up being with Rayleigh on Shabondi. So maybe the treasure that was stolen, Shaki was stolen by Rayleigh because she liked Rayleigh. And in reality, the actual treasure that moved them to God Valley was something that's entirely different. Particular fruit that Rox obviously wanted, that second fruit that he mentioned in the last chapter, it could have been there too. At face value, it looks like this is a Shaki focused event when Rox and Roger Pirates pulled up, but it may not be the case at all. That's all sleight of hand, a trick, a fugazi on Oda's part to actually mask, to veil over the real treasure that was taken to God Valley, the thing that Rox really wanted the most by far and away, which would be a key thing for him to actually control the entire world and bring down the current world government order. And then the last panels where we do see the 5 elders, someone didn't notice that when you go to the far left of the chairs, of the couches, we do have what seems to be, from right to left, Saturn, Mars, Time Man, and Ethan. But the person on the far left may be someone else different, because Jupiter is for sure the youngest among the 5 elders, and this person's neck is kind of built different. They're kind of like hunched over. Could this person be one of the 5 elders before Jupiter, the one that, let's say, that he replaces? And if so, hold on, how did this person pass away in the first place? What happened there? I'm not saying it's a case per se, but it's actually a pretty cool theory if that person is different. So all that being said, all I'm saying is have an open mind, because it may not be shocky, but it could be something else entirely, and Oda's trying to trick you guys. This chapter overall, I think, is a pretty damn good chapter of One Piece, possibly a huge mover for one of the most pivotal events in the story history, God Valley, but it could be, and that alone right now is worthy of a review for sure. So let me know your stance on the subject matter at hand. If you enjoy your boys' video content, give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and click on that bell to join the notification squad. I'm gonna catch you guys and gals on the flip side.
See you. Bye bye.